we got ourselves another video here. This time I'm working on a zombie cat for Halloween. Still a couple months away, but I always seem to fall behind when it gets close to that holiday. So we're going to be sculpting this for trade shows. So I'm going to be making duplicates of it. So let's get started. Alright, well the clay we're going to be starting with is Super Sculpting Original. And then we'll get the armature made up, basic aluminum wire and aluminum foil. We'll get it all covered up with clay here, get it in the oven, and then we start working off of that. We're using a living doll for all the details on this one. Alright, starting to look like a cat, don't you think? Alright, adding a little bit of the living doll here. We're going to be working our way up towards the head. And then as we're putting it on here, we'll be detailing all the fur too. Well, on the cats here, there's no clear definition on where the legs are at, except for where the feet stick out. But we'll try and do what we can here. And like I said, this is going to be for like trade shows, craft fairs, so I'm going to be making molds of this. So I have to be really aware of where all the voids are and where the silicone is going to pour in there. So I'm going to try and fill in this corner as much as possible. Now I'll come back with a Dremel and kind of grind out this elbow a little bit. I'm kind of noticing that this cat that I've got going here, the shoulders are a bit broad. I want to kind of keep that within its hips, so I'm going to have to go back and grind that down and read it. Alright, now we got that shoulder in pretty good. We're going to start working on the back. I'll get the other half in. Now that original form there, it's already baked, so it's kind of dry. So we're going to put some clay softener on there so that makes it a little more tacky for the fresh clay. And get it all blended in here, and then we'll texture it up before we throw it in the oven again. Now when I'm doing the texture for the fur, I'll use that tool, use the tip of it, and then kind of drag the clay out, get that texture in one direction. Then I'll flip the sculpt around and do it another direction so that the lines aren't straight. It kind of jags in and blends in together. Getting all that texture in there. Now this part here is kind of challenging. You get that spine to blend into the tail as it curves around there, and I don't really have any good reference for that, so wish me luck. Looks a little indented there, but we'll fill it out a little bit more. Ends up coming out pretty good. Alright, now we jumped up to the head here and got the little cavities made out for the eyes. And we'll start getting a little bit more detail on the face. Yeah, it's no cat I've ever owned. Yeah, when setting this down, I kind of noticed that the cat's just kind of looking down, but I want him looking straight ahead. So I kind of broke the neck here, and then we'll force it to look where I want it to look. Alright, well, we're going to get this all smoothed out, add some more clay in there, bulk it out, a little pot belly, but once he's set into place, you won't see much of that. Alright, so I pre-baked the eyes, and we're going to fill up the sockets here with some bacon bond to hold it really secure, and we'll get them into place and throw it in the oven. Alright, now we're going to start working on the jack-o'-lantern. So we'll get the base, we'll start off with some aluminum foil here and then cover that up again with Sculpting Original. Using up the tip of the brush here to get some texture on there. Alright, now that it's been baked and it's cooled down, we'll start working on the pumpkin. Now the jack-o'-lantern, the cat's going to be standing or sitting inside the jack-o'-lantern, so then it's going to be busted up, and I'm just going to have the remnants of what's left of the jack-o'-lantern. Of course, I gave the cat kind of a little bit of an attitude, so hopefully that comes out in the sculpture. Now with the ears, I started placing them and realized that the head was just kind of too big. The back of the head kind of comes up and molds right into the ears, and right here the ears are too far back. So we'll do a bit of grinding and then I remake the back of the head. Alright, well, this is a zombie cat we're working on, so I got to start working on the zombie pieces. So we're going to start with the forearm here, and we're just going to use these bits of floor wire as representations for the bone. And I use UV resin here, kind of, instead of trying to super glue it, and then hold the two wires together before I secure it to the cat. Alright, we'll get it stuck to the cat here. Throw it in the oven so where it's all nice and secure, and then come back and add the foot. Alright, well, we're going to build up the whole front part of the pumpkin here, where his face is going to go. We're going to add the ridges, and then later we'll come back in and mark out where the eyes and the mouth go, and then cut those out. And this is pretty much how the cat's going to be sitting in there, so I'll get an idea of what's going to be exposed and what people can see. Yeah, they should be able to see some of the zombie parts through the eyes and the mouth right about here. Working on little tufts of hair inside the ears here, so it kind of fills in for when we start making the mold. Alright, working on the pumpkin ridges here. Now this is going to eventually make the whole front of the pumpkin a little thicker, which is okay because the base pumpkin is going to be made out of gypsum, and that white cement, and then the cat's going to be made out of resin. Alright, kind of a fleshy part here on the arms. We'll have to paint that in really good, make sure it kind of looks bloody and gross. And then we got the kneecap here with the bone sticking out. And then parts of the back here that I ground out with the Dremel. Where this is going to show parts of the spine and the ribs of the cat. Alright, coming along here pretty good. I'm kind of worried about this other rib. I'm trying to decide whether I should have the shoulder blade kind of sticking out a little bit or the rib. I end up going with just putting the rib in there. Alright, now we got the cat's snout kind of sticking out a little bit, but we're going to build up the face. We're going to start with the eyes here. So the eye that I'm working on now is going to be the zombie eye, and the other one's going to end up being a normal cat's. Alright, so when we got the pumpkin here, now we just pulled it out of the oven, let it cool down a little bit, but the clay is still soft. So this gives me a chance to cut into it. Now, when you do this, of course, be really careful because I'm poking through this clay and my fingers are on the other side. Alright, so it's cooled down, it's really firm now, so we're going to soften up the edges with the sandpaper here. Yeah, I was thinking that the nose was sticking out just a little too much for a cat, so I ended up grinding it down, and we're remaking it now. Alright, we put a couple of gouges into the shoulder blade here, and then we put some clay on it, and gonna kind of feather in the fur a little bit so it looks like it's underneath the fur. Alright, now this whole base and the cat's going to be lit up with a little LED flickering light, kind of a flame candle light. So this is the one we're going to be using, and then I'm going to have to cut a hole out of the base where it can fit in. Once again, I did throw it in the oven and let it cool down a little bit, so the clay is soft while we're hitting it again. I'll get it from the top and then underneath to the bottom and make a good hole. Right, adding a little bit more detail here, we're going to put a rat or a mouse underneath the cat's butt, smashed, but you're only going to be able to see the back side of it. Alright, so we got it glued down on this cardboard, and we're going to start dividing it up in two. So the front part here is going to be covered in just regular modeling clay. Okay, keep adding that modeling clay and get it all bulked out, and just a little bit above the model itself. Now we'll get it all smoothed out and start filling in all the crevices of the face. Get little bits of clay and stuff and filling in the eyes and the mouth. Now we'll take another tool here and we'll go around the edges, get ourselves a nice clean line. Alright, we got the first part and the second part somewhere. I poured the first part, then removed the clay, and then poured the second part. I lost the video somewhere along the way. But I used Vaseline as a separator between pouring. And then now we're going to go ahead and clean up the extra silicone around the base here. Now that center silicone circle there, I end up having to hollow that out. It ends up being too solid for me to try and keep pulling it, and I keep busting the product when I pull it out of the mold. So I end up hollowing that out, making it a little more squishy. It still holds the form, but it's easier to pull through the mold. Alright, well, we got the first pour here. Everything comes out pretty good. A little bit spot down here at the base. I think that's where some of the Vaseline kind of built up, but it's alright. It works out for pumpkin. Alright, now I'm pulling it out of the mold here. Parts of the face are still a little bit too thin. Upper corner of the eye and it keeps snapping off, so I end up having to take a X-Acto knife and gouging out parts of the silicone behind there to let more of that gypsum build up, making it thicker in itself without having to change the actual sculpt itself. Now when you do a sculpture and you're making a mold, each sculpture has its own challenges. You figure out where the tweaks are and have to make the adjustments to the mold. Sometimes you have to make a whole new mold. Here we're just going to go back in and kind of cut places that we need to. We're missing a lot of the teeth in there to where the gypsum's not getting in there. Too much of a pocket of air in there. So we'll make a little channel to where that gypsum can get in there. Yep, same thing here. And these 3 castings, the teeth are just not coming through. So let's make the decision, jump in and cut out those channels. Figure right about here is where I'm going to need to cut those gouges out. And now to the cat. Let's see how that came out. Now I kind of used a transparent silicone so I can see where I need to cut at. I did my best to keep from breaking this original sculpt, but the legs are just too fragile in here, too thin, but it's an easy fix. Pulling this out, his cat here, and we can see that there's quite a big pocket in there. We're going to pull that silicone. Luckily this is resin, so it's a lot more durable. Plus it's still kind of fresh, so it's a little bit flexible. Alright, looks pretty good here. A little bit of flashing air, a little bit bubble underneath the chin, but we can grind that down. No one's going to see that. Looks pretty good. Alright, let's get to painting this thing. We're going to make it black. Start with putting a little bit of fleshy pink around there. Actually, we're going to get all the zombie areas kind of pinkish, and we'll be adding some greenish goop, and then afterwards we'll cover it up with some UV resin. Give it smooth and icky. Of course, with the pumpkin here, we're going to be using pumpkin colors. We use brown around the base, pumpkin on the outside there, nice orange. And then on the inside, we'll be using kind of a yellow, light whitish yellow. And a little bit of gray for the mouse. Alright, well let's finish painting this up and getting on to showing you what we ended up with. Well, here we have them separate, but when we get them all together, we'll be gluing the cat inside. But the light, you can be able to remove that, so if you need to change it out. With some Halloween colors, I cast a few of these in some clear resin and get that light to shine up through. See how that turned out. I think that was a nice surprise. And here we have it with the lights turned off. Can't really see the zombie details in it too clearly, but I think it gives off a good effect. That was a fun little project, and thanks for joining me. Go ahead and leave your likes and your comments below, and we'll see you on the next video.